content over everything.
Firstly, thank you JC and Soko Films for filming us. I also want to thank the Church of England for being here and for filming us as well. The Church of England is the second best channel at Speaker's Corner, otherwise known as COE. Please support the Bentley Fund. I want to do a talk today about the prison system and Christians who are in prison. There are many Christians in prison. Some Christians are in prison because they deserve to be there, because they've done something wrong and they owe a debt to society that needs to be paid. Some Christians are in prison because of an injustice in the legal system, a failing of the court. Some Christians have been tried because we live in a society today where the British state is increasingly clamping down on freedom of speech and the freedom to express ideas that contradict the political narrative. Whatever the case, for the reason why Christians have found themselves in prison, there is a teaching that Christians need to be aware of. In Hebrews 13, reading from verse 1, it says, "Let love of the brethren continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. Remember the prisoners as though in prison with them, and those who are ill-treated, since you yourselves also are in the body. Marriage is to be held in honor amongst all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. Make sure that your character is free from the love of money, being content with what you have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you, so that we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What will man do to me?" The apostle is describing the character of the early church. He's describing the way that the early church should live. And in and amongst that description of hospitality, of generosity, of a loving affection amongst the brethren, and also of the idea of honouring marriage and protecting the marriage bed, it speaks specifically about solidarity with prisoners. There are Christians in prison, some of them because they deserve to be there, some of them because they are victims of injustice, some of them possibly in this day and age because they have been persecuted by a political state that is unwilling to accept contradiction by the Christian community. And we as Christians are called to remember them as if we are there ourselves. How do you do that? How do you do that without empathy? How do you do that without a sense of imagining their suffering, softening your heart to feel what they feel, to know what they are going through? Christians, it is an obligation of our faith to remember those Christians who are in prison and to stand with them. However, many Christians are not engaged in this area at all. We don't remember the Christian prisoner. We don't remember those who are languishing in prison or who are being mistreated. There are Christians who are suffering and other Christians are apathetic to their suffering. There are Christians who are suffering in prison and there are Christians outside of prison who are doing nothing about it and do not care. The truth of the matter is that over 2,000 years of Christian history, there has been a strong tradition within the church of Christians being the bad guys, of Christians being criminalized, of Christians being imprisoned for their faith. The church today is in captivity to the middle classes. It has a middle class way of thinking about what it means to be church. It's do-gooder Christianity. It's liberal cultural Christianity. It's the kind of Christianity that impresses no one, speaks to no one, and can have no great impact on society because it doesn't offer a genuine alternative. There are many Christians who we consider martyrs and heroes of the faith who were seen as criminals in their own age. Many of them were executed and were martyred. There are good Christian prison fellowships. There are good Christian prison ministries that are helping Christians who are suffering in prison. And I urge you all, I urge every Christian to remember those who are suffering in the cell, to remember our brothers and sisters who are in Her Majesty's custody in Belmarsh, in Brixton Prison. They need your support and they need your help. And that brings me on to another subject about the prison system, which is that the British prison system at this moment in time is being neglected by the state and is being handed over to the criminals. Drug gangs run rampant in British prisons. Drug abuse is running rampant in British prisons. The prison system has become a college of criminality within the United Kingdom. People are going to prison for minor offences and coming out of prison hardened criminals, addicted to drugs. And they are doing so because the British government and the British people have forgotten the prisoner. They don't care about the prisoner. They don't care about those who have committed a crime or have been criminalised instead of because of their innocence, and they are now languishing within our British prison system. This is a tragic failing of a liberal state, and it is failing because the British state does not want to teach values. It doesn't want to teach religion. It doesn't want to teach a worldview. It thinks that every problem can be solved by teaching skills and jobs. That is not the way you reform a character. You reform a character by teaching values, by teaching a worldview, by teaching the development of character, which is something that the British prison system is not doing. As well as handing over our prisoners to the drug gangs, the British state has stood silently aside whilst Islamist thugs are taking over elements of the British prison system. I just want to bring to your attention an article by the mainstream media, which I'll quote from at length. So, to give an example, this is a story repeated by Sean O'Neill from The Times, So this isn't some right-wing media outlet. This is the story. And this is from February 19th, 2020. A convicted killer with no history of extremism launched a copycat jihadist attack on jail staff last week, the Times has learned. The violent prisoner faked a suicide attempt to lure officers into his cell in the segregation unit at Winchester Jail before attacking them with an improvised weapon strapped to his arm. Although not in prison for terrorist offences, the inmate told officers immediately after the incident that he was attempting a jihadist attack. Details of the assault can be revealed as senior officials in the prison service and security agencies face increasing demands from Downing Street to confront the threat of extremism in jail, an issue that they have been ignoring for decades. After a terrorist released early from his prison sentence stabbed 2 people in Streatham, South London this month. Security sources said that Number 10 had called for a deep dive into jail radicalisation and was considering far-reaching reforms. I guarantee that those far-reaching reforms will fail because the Liberal state does not have the ideological apparatus to deal with Salafist extremism. Discussions have been held about post-sentence detention orders, similar to those used in Australia. How does that change their ideology? Under which inmates would continue to be detained after serving their time if intelligence assessments still deem them to be a security threat. Terrorist prisoners posing as jail emirs or leaders have been forcing inmates to convert to their brand of Islam, holding self-styled Sharia courts, intimidating official prison imams and handing out punishment beatings. The attack at Winchester, which happened in the early hours of last Thursday, will add urgency to the issue. No sweat, Sherlock. The fact of the matter is that these kind of terrorist gangs, when they are sentenced with the longest sentences of 15 and 20 years, then end up running the prison because they don't feel they have anything to lose. And a prison officer can be easily intimidated when he is outnumbered by a bunch of hardened criminals who are serving long sentences and already consider their life lost. Whereas the prison officer is doing a job, getting a wage and paying bills and looking after his family, and he thinks to himself, this is not worth it. And so many prison officers leave the system, whilst many other prison officers are co-opted to the criminal gangs themselves, or simply stand to one side whilst the prison gangs run the system. The British prison system needs reform, but it needs reform not along the lines of some wishy-washy, wimpy, left-wing, liberal, snowflake ideology. It needs reform along the lines of a muscular Christianity that will move prison officers into the prisons in such numbers and with such tenacity and the liberty to use the force that is necessary to crack these self-appointed prison chiefs into place, to break their hold of terror over the prison system, to make sure that every prisoner knows that it is the prison officer that runs the prison and not the prison gang. But the reality is the Liberal state doesn't have the ideological wherewithal to do that, because liberalism has failed the British people just like it's failing British prisoners. The inmate General Imuri 20 is understood to have been observed lying motionless on the floor of his cell. As 3 officers entered the room, he jumped up and lunged at them with a sharpened instrument, but has restrained without anyone suffering injury. The prison services confirmed that an attack had taken place at the jail and was being investigated by police. The inmate has been placed in segregation within the past 3 weeks because he was assessed as a threat to prison staff. Imiru, who was jailed in 2018 after becoming the first person to be convicted of an acid attack killing, has previously assaulted officers at another jail. The Times understands that he had recently displayed a growing interest in extremism and had attempted to contact jihadist prisoners. Violence speaks to violence. Hatred speaks to hatred. And the Salafist ideology that is running rampant in our prisons is an ideology of bitterness, resentment and hatred. And it is not being challenged by liberal do-gooders, because liberal do-gooders can't call a spade a spade. They can't call an Islamist or see the connection between Islamic teaching and the fact that we have a jihadist ideology running rampant in our prison system. You can only confront this ideology with an ideology equally as tough and that has the same ideological wherewithal to meet it toe for toe. And that is a muscular Christian faith, not a wimpy snowflake liberalism. Christians. There are Christians suffering in British prisons today because of these same Islamist gangs. And it doesn't just stop at the gangs. In Brixton Prison, just last year, they appointed as the chief chaplain a Muslim ideologue who used his position to kick out a Christian pastor who was doing outreach in Brixton Prison and converting prisoners to Christianity. And the Muslim chief chaplain used his position to have that Christian pastor expelled from Brixton Prison. The reality is that the liberal progressive worldview does not have the ideological wherewithal to recognise the fact that there are those who are using positions of influence and authority to push an agenda that is in contradiction to the liberal state. Because the liberal state is ideologically blind. Christians. There are Christians who are suffering in our prison system, and it is the duty of all Christians to stand with them. Hebrews 13:3 calls us to cultivate a sense of solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the prison system. We cannot ignore their plight. We cannot ignore their suffering. We cannot ignore their pain. We cannot ignore the challenges they face. We have to stand up for them. We have to stand with them. We have to help them. And that means creating the ministries and the organisations that can defend them both in the prison and outside of the prison, that can stand up for them when they are being attacked and when the prison guards are standing to one side and allowing them to be attacked. and standing up for their rights and for their right to practice the faith. I know that the Anglican Church particularly is guilty of whimsically allowing prisoners to come to fellowship who are not Christians at all. And then those prisoners who are not Christian talk through the assembly of the Christians, preventing them from actual worship. And the Anglican Church goes along with that. Christians, we have to stand up for our brothers and sisters in the prison system. Any questions? You've been listening in, sister, what do you think?
Yeah, everything is really good, well said.
Thank you. What's your name? Demata.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
What's your name?
They call me Bob here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't use that. I can't use my real name. So, my next talk. DJ, could you get JC? Nothing. We're gonna go and do a debate. You can come and record it if you want. What's your name, sir?
Brett.
What did you think of what you heard today?
Kind of rubbish, if I'm honest.
You don't think that we should stand with Christians in the prison
No.
system? What do you think we should
Why
do?
should Christians have some special benefit? You were talking about the Muslim, I don't know, what would you call him in Brixton? I used to work for the prison service.
There was a Christian prison chaplain who was kicked out of the Brixton prison
Kicked
system.
out of the prison by the Muslim
The
chaplain?
chief chaplain of Brixton prison
But
used his
there
position
is,
to
in
get the
every
Christian
prison
kicked
I've
out.
worked in, there's a Muslim chaplain, there's a Christian one,
Yeah, but there's a
Catholic
chief chaplain
one.
that's in
Is
charge,
there?
isn't it?
Not
Yes,
as
of
far
course
as
there
I'm
is.
aware.
Then maybe you don't understand how the
No, but
chaplaincy system works.
I kind
then.
of do, because part of my job was to work with the chaplaincy.
There is a
I worked
chief.
in the
There
IT
is,
department,
there is a chief chaplain to the chaplaincy system.
and I didn't. And this chief chaplain can kick other people out.
He can
just
use
because
his
they're-
position to influence to get people
Really?
kicked out. How are you doing? I'm all right. You?
Can we have a conversation today, later on?
Is this
To
Dawood?
do, yeah, Dawood, to do with last week.
We can do it right now, actually, but I want to talk about a different topic.
Oh.
Islamic Tawhid.
Yeah, go.
Let's do Islamic
I'm
Tawhid.
over there, I'm going to come.
We can do it right now.
I know, I can't, I just have to attend over there something.
How long are you going to be?
20 minutes maybe.
20 minutes. All right. 20 minutes. I'm going to go and find someone to talk to. Yeah? Shall we go find Hashim? Are you mobile?
Yeah.
We're going to look for anyone within the Dawah team because I want to talk to them about Tawhid. Go on. What's your thought?
To Aura, he set it up with Salam Koda because there's no one like from the Dawa.
Well, let's go talk to Borat.
Okay, cool. Who's staying here?
Content over everything. From now to Behaviour.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen.
COE.
Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. I don't even listen to Sky YG.
Yeah, we do. Actually.
COE.
Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. I don't even listen to Sky YG. Man, just listen to COE. Man, just listen to COE. Man, just listen to COE. If you see me, it's COE. Content over everything.
COE.
Man not even know BBC, man not even know ITV, not even listen to the MUM, they just listen to COE. Sorry, mommy, I'm lying. We listen to your mouth.
Wow.
As Paperboy in